Welcome back. It's good to be with you for our fourth session. So far we've seen three of the movements in the cycle of grace. It began with acceptance, followed by sustenance, and those were two moments in Jesus' life when he received grace. And then as we move to the output dimension of his life, in the last session we looked at significance. And in this session, we're going to explore the final movement, which is the movement of fruitfulness. In the original model, put together by Lake and Brunner, they used another word. They used the word achievement. I prefer the word fruitfulness in obedient ministry. And this was where Jesus' grace flowed out, and you'll notice this now in the diagram, flowed out into the world. And you will notice as you look at the diagram very carefully that now the flow of grace in his life becomes a little thinner, a little less. I wonder if I could just do a quick brainstorm. Can you think of ways in Jesus' life in which grace flowed out of his life into the lives of other people and into the life of the world? And perhaps we could just list some of those dimensions of his ministry.
His beautiful ministry with the children always included them and welcomed them. And his love was just very, very special.
Right.
For them.
Right, and that was one dimension of ministry. The way that he got alongside children. Children just seemed to love being with him, and in his presence they felt valued and cherished within a society which often didn't have a place for children. So ministry with children was a vital and life-giving part of Jesus's ministry with others. Any other activities of ministry through which grace flows out into the world?
I was thinking about the idea of transformation. It seemed that those whose lives were touched by Jesus were transformed.
Right. He had a ministry of transformation, particularly in the lives of individuals, and we can just think of people like Zacchaeus, the woman caught in adultery. These were people who, when they were touched by Jesus' words and his teachings and the way that he was with them, experienced incredible transformation in their own lives. Any other activities that we can note?
People who were in the margins and often overlooked and considered as outcasts were made to feel accepted and given a space to belong.
Right. Jesus was constantly making outsiders insiders. He had an incredible ministry of including. I often call Jesus the great includer. Always seeking to include people within the orbit of God's love and God's care for them. Any other activities of ministry through which grace flows out of Jesus' life into the lives of others and into the world?
Jesus had a group of followers who hung on his every word and followed him wherever he went. When the Pharisees tried to trip him up, those followers were the ones who defended him and believed in what he had to say to them.
Right. Not only were Jesus' disciples a source of sustenance in his life, he also gave an incredible amount of time to the forming of a ministry team. He really seemed to invest himself deeply in the formation of a group of people who would continue his ministry when he was no longer here in flesh and blood. And that was a very, very important part of his ministry. Can you think of any other activities of ministry? Now, in the book, Cycle of Grace, there will be a list of other dimensions of Jesus' ministry through which grace flowed through his life into the lives of others. and into the life of the world. So there you have the cycle of grace. It starts with acceptance. It moves into sustenance. Those were the two parts that were part of the input in Jesus' life. And then on the output side, there was who he was, the significance of his being, and then also his fruitfulness in obedient ministry. Now remember why Brunner and Lake put together the cycle of grace. What was the original need? The original need that they were addressing was the level of burnout and weariness and resentment in the lives of the missionaries. And so when they came up with the cycle of grace, and this was when the lights went on for me, they concluded that people in ministry were not living in the cycle of grace. They started off where the cycle of grace ended and worked the other way round. They sought to achieve or be fruitful in order to feel significant, hoping that that would sustain them, and then maybe they would have a degree of acceptance in their lives. And so for me, the real genius of the cycle of grace is it helps us to see how we reverse the cycle of grace in our life. And rather than living in a cycle of grace, we live in a cycle of works. And when we live in a cycle of works, it's a recipe for weariness, for burnout, and for cynicism. So the invitation here is an invitation to discern when we are drawn into a cycle of works, and then to make choices to begin to live more fully in the cycle of grace.
This chapter has given us fresh insights on grace. In our final session, Jerry and I will join Trevor to discuss how the cycle of grace can be even more helpful to you as Christian leaders.